Today we're going to talk about next level training very briefly, who we are and what we do. Your amazing brain, I'm going to give you some brain facts. And we're going to go into the 5 core competencies of emotional intelligence. And I just want to focus in on one particular intelligence, emotional intelligence, to round our time together off. And if we have time, we'll do some action planning. And I'll be reminding you of things like our Emotional Intelligence at Work workshop on the 23rd of February. All right, so we're Next Level Training. You can see there who we are and what we do. If you're interested, please do visit nextleveltraining.co.uk. We are a social enterprise, and 50% of everything we do, it goes towards our social goals of raising the economic hopes and aspirations of Africans and whoever runs across our path, to be perfectly honest. I'm Mervyn Murray, 20 years this month in people development. I'm a certified coach and facilitator, and I operate with very large organizations and very small organizations. So using the chat box, can you tell me, can anybody come up with a definition of emotional intelligence for me, please? Mark, right. EQ is the ability to understand, use and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress. You've thought about this, Mark, haven't you? Very, very good.
No,
there is no
website, to be honest.
There is no
I thought
prize.
you were going to ask, so I was ready.
Yeah, hey, all right. Self-awareness and how to use your emotions. Thank you, Baz. Yeah, really, really good. I like it. The Daniel Goleman one, which I'll share with you, is this: the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves and managing emotions in ourselves and in our relationships. What do you think is the goal of emotional intelligence? You can jump on the mic. There's only a few of us, so please feel free to shout out.
Oh, that's
peace.
Peace.
Mark Brown has put peace.
Be at peace with yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
And peace, and peace with others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So
when people are emotionally aware, they're great to be with and great to work with.
Yes, they are. And all the research which we'll get into shows that if you can increase your emotional intelligence, you'll increase not only your results, but the results of everyone around you. All right, so here's some of the research. Back in the day, we used to recruit for university smarts. If you've got a university degree, then you've got a good IQ, and so we can teach you the technical bits. However, now organizations are focusing more and more and more on emotional intelligence, because they found that emotional intelligence is twice as important as intelligence quotient, IQ, and the technical ability to put together. I'm sure we've all met, or we've all had, a leader or a boss who is highly intelligent but is cold as a fish and is difficult to work with and for. And so Daniel Goleman, in his book, Emotional Intelligence at Work, speaks about threshold capabilities and star capabilities. And of course, emotional intelligence comes into those star capabilities, where if you focus on your emotional intelligence, you will skyrocket your performance. Whereas IQ and technical skills have a limit to your performance. You know, for example, you know, planning is great, and we all should plan, but doesn't matter how good at planning you are, it will only take you so far up the corporate ladder. I want to talk a little bit about your amazing brain now, and it's one of the areas of our bodies that let's go back. It's one of the areas of our bodies that is very flexible. It has what's known as plasticity and is able to grow and flex. So the more we learn, the more it grows and flexes. You saw a very quick picture there. Does anybody? I think most of the people in this room have seen this picture before. Anybody, is there anybody here who hasn't seen this picture before? And if they haven't, can they tell me what they see? Stick your hand up if you
The old lady and young lady.
the old lady and young lady. Yes, Baz, that's it. So this is a famous sketch by Toulouse-Lautrec, who was dumped by his younger girlfriend. So he took revenge by drawing her as an old woman. So some people see the young woman only, and some people see the old lady only, and some people can see both. And that's down to our mental filters, how we perceive the world, how we see the world. Our amazing brains calculates and distinguishes between these things very, very rapidly. And I'll give you another example of that as we go through later on. Here's some more brain facts for you. There are 86 billion neurons in our brains, and each neuron links to our intelligence. The brain takes up 20% of all our energy requirements for the body, but only has 2% of the weight of our body. So one of the implications of that is that our brain is so fantastic that it wants to conserve energy at every single moment of the day. And it does that by taking shortcuts. So for example, we will believe something about somebody as a label, and all we think about is the label. You know, this person is homeless, so we call them homeless. And behind the label are all our beliefs, thoughts, and assumptions about the homeless because of that label. So the brain doesn't have to think about all of those other things. It only has to create a label and think about that. That way it conserves energy and can operate optimally for the things that it thinks are important. And of course, we have 70,000. I don't know how they get to this research, by the way. This is, it troubles me. But the research tells us that we have over 70,000 thoughts per day. And many of these thoughts are popping off at the unconscious level. And so we are not really aware of them. And towards the end of our time together today, I want to give you an insight into how our thoughts lead to our outcomes, how our behavior leads to our behavior and therefore our outcomes. All right. Some more stuff about the brain. So when we experience the world, the information basically travels through our spinal cord up into the limbic system, which is the ancient part of our brain. It's called the reptilian brain. And the limbic system, this is where emotions are experienced. And this is also where the brain has not evolved since the dawn of time. So the limbic system, how it operates, hasn't changed in the millennia that we've been on the earth. The frontal lobe, however, that's where more rational processing happens, and is called the human brain or the modern brain. And this has evolved. So as man has evolved, the frontal lobe has evolved, and this is where all our rational processing happens. And you can see there that these are the two areas. The way in which these two areas communicate is the source of our emotional quotient, or EQ. And also I want to just mention the parietal system, and this is where everything is stored. This is where our memories are stored, and the more of an emotional attachment that the limbic system puts onto an event, the easier the memory is to retrieve from the neural pathways and those billions of neurons that we spoke about. And the more often we think, like a highway or like a muscle, that neuron or neural pathway is strengthened, and so we can recall it a lot easier, which is why in training we get people to repeat things, or we are repetitive about things, and we get people to think about things more than just the once, so that we move it from our short-term memory into our long-term memory, which is then stored in the parietal system. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask me about the brain before we move on?
Not really, Mervyn. Just reminds me of the unconscious bias training that I've done, and how some of our thinking comes about because of that old historic bit of there, the oldest bit of the brain, isn't it? The limbic bit, is that the bit, the crocodile bit?
The limbic system. Yeah, the bias actually comes from what's known as our RAS, which is our reticular activating system, which only allows onto our stream of consciousness those things that are of interest to us. So a negative belief about somebody would only allow events that confirm that belief onto our stream of consciousness, as an example. Nice one, John. Thank you. All right, moving it along. I just want to show you the EQ tree, which I've stolen from a really great book that I'd recommend to everybody, which is Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Travis Bradbury, the EQ tree. And on the EQ tree, here are all the skills that are within emotional intelligence. And the neat thing about this is if you develop one part of the tree, the whole tree benefits from that development and grows. And I think that's a really neat metaphor for emotional intelligence. Can emotional intelligence be learned later in life? And the answer is yes. Unlike let's say trying to learn a new language or a new skill, emotional intelligence has been found that everybody who tries to develop in emotional intelligence can do so if they put their minds to it, of course. There isn't an age at which that skill is diminished or that learning is diminished. So I promised you we'd talk about the 5 emotional intelligence competencies, which are self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, and self-awareness. Self-regulation is the ability to control disruptive moods and impulses. And how many times have we done something and immediately regretted it? I know from my own experience, a lot. Motivation, the need to pursue goals with energy and persistence. And empathy, which is the ability to understand the emotional makeup of others. And of course, when we get into social skills, social skills is one of the areas I find that managers and leaders struggle with the most. How to talk to their team, how to talk to large teams in a proficient way, and being able to build effective networks and relationships. Many managers struggle with that skill, and working on their emotional intelligence will help them with those skills. Self-awareness. I believe that self-awareness is the first of the building blocks within emotional intelligence. Without being aware, you can't really, if I am unaware of my shortcomings, then I'm liable not to want to develop those areas. So understanding our moods, where our emotions come from, why do we feel what we feel when we feel it, being aware of those triggers and drives, and many people are totally unaware of the effect their communication has on other people, as an example. Thank you, Sani. Recognizing our own feelings and deploying them in relationships. Welcome to you, sir, from Africa. So that was there was a quick insight there. Did anybody notice what the next slide actually said? Anybody want to guess?
Paris in the
Springtime
spring.
in Paris. Or
Paris
Paris in the springtime.
Paris in the springtime. So this is an old trick of mine. You can see it there. It's actually Paris in the spring, and one of the ways in which our brain operates, and this speaks to self-awareness, where we have a blind spot, is that it will delete things that don't sit with our beliefs. So, for example, those that read Paris in the spring, your brain, in less time than it takes to blink an eye, deleted the second "the" for you, or one of them, because it doesn't appear in the language. So it doesn't make sense. So let me delete it. And quite often in workshops, I've shown this slide, this particular graphic, and even looking at it directly for a number of seconds, the penny still doesn't drop with people that there are two "the" in the graphic. That's how strong our brains are, how robust they are, and how quick our brains are to either delete, distort, or delete, distort the events that we have in our lives. There is a third thing it does, and I just can't get to it. All right. So now what I'm going to do is give you I want to give you the self-talk cycle, because as I mentioned before, we have over 70,000 thoughts per day. And a lot of that is where we're talking to ourselves, our internal dialogue, which leads to, so the self-talk cycle essentially is we have self-talk, which leads to a self-image, which leads to an anticipation of the future, which leads to behavior, which then leads to further self-talk. So self-talk can be positive or negative, and that then leads to a self-image, which can be either positive or negative. Let me give you a personal example of this. So I started up my business 20 years ago, and quite soon into starting my business, the Inland Revenue sent me a bill with lots of zeros on the end. and my self-talk was very negative about this tax bill. And my self-image compared to the Inland Revenue was very negative. There's little old me, I've just started this new business, and the Inland Revenue, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about. I owe this money. So my self-image was very much at the disadvantage of the Inland Revenue because of my negative self-talk. I want to talk about Muhammad Ali. What's his self-image? What did he call himself?
Called himself the greatest.
I am the greatest. And the way he said it, there was no doubt. So I want to talk about Muhammad Ali. However, I do want to finish off my story with regards to the tax man. My wife, Jackie, her self-image compared to the Inland Revenue was very positive. She said, look, they've obviously made a mistake. They don't know what they're doing. I know what I'm doing. Let me take control of your tax affairs and I'll get it squashed. And they took me to court. Long story short, because of her anticipation of the future, which was they've made a mistake, I'll get it quashed. Her behavior was very proactive. She looked into my tax affairs. The Inland Revenue took us to court. She represented me in court. And not only did I not owe the money, but they owed me £900. Happy days, happy days. But getting back to Muhammad Ali, he was self-styled, I am the greatest. And he said it in a way that nobody doubted that he was the greatest. And he talked about his anticipation of the future. When he trained for a boxing match, it was usually 12 or 13 weeks up in the hills of New York or somewhere very, very lonely. And he said, when I'm training, when I'm doing my road work or ring work or gym work, he said, I would play the video of the match over and over and over and in my mind. And when I know that's when, that's how the boxing match is going to go, that's when he used to come out in front of the cameras and he'd make a prediction. And he said, he'd put it in rhyme and he'd say, he's going to hit the floor in 4 or he's going to take a dive in 5. He correctly predicted 17 out of 20 of his own world championship boxing matches. By playing, he called it, I create my own future history. That was his take on it. 17 out of 20. He was asked about the 3 that he got wrong, and he said, my opponent had created a more powerful future than the one I'd created. You get the future you anticipate. Behavior. His first heavyweight boxing match was against Sonny Liston, who was a mountain of a man. Little known about the Cassius Clay, he was the first boxer to do trash talk at a weigh-in. He was the first boxer to do it. And he pointed at Sonny Liston and said, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. And when he was asked about that moment, Sonny Liston said, well, I just thought he was a madman. I thought I was climbing in the ring with a madman. And the match wasn't a particularly good match to watch. But instead of throwing his haymaker punches that he was famous for, his behavior was reactive instead of proactive. He stood in the middle of the ring waiting for Cassius Clay to do something. And I think it was the 5th round when he dropped his guard slightly and Cassius Clay stepped in and punched his lights out, basically. And so your thoughts lead to your self-image that leads to the anticipation of the future that you have, which either can be pessimistic or optimistic, which leads to our behavior, which is either proactive or reactive, which then leads to more self-talk. So we have thoughts which lead to feelings, which then leads to behavior, which then leads to your results, your outcomes. If you're not getting the results you want, change your thoughts, and you will change how you feel, and you will change your behavior, and you will get the results that you want. Thank you, everyone. This has been your free taster session of emotional intelligence at work. Please hop over to nextleveltraining.co.uk to book your slot, or have a look at the number of workshops that may appeal to you at nextleveltraining.co.uk. We're here to serve you, and whatever you need. Thank you. That's the end of the taster session itself. I really I want to thank you all for coming along, supporting me, coming along to listen to everything. Yeah, unless you have any questions at all, I wish you a wonderful rest of the week, and perhaps we can catch up.